If you really want to be revolutionary, if you really want to spark change, it starts with you. And I'm going to give you two things that are probably not the traditional things you hear about how to actually spark change in the world, but it's a reason and a method to my madness. Spoiler alert, the two things are be creative and read more, but I am going to speak more in depth on these topics and why I truly believe that they matter. I'm going to start with reading more. First of all, the number of people who do not read is still so astounding to me. And I mean, I don't know the actual statistic, but I mean the number of people that I come into contact with on a regular basis that are floored that people are reading. And not just that people are reading, but people are reading at a particular pace. Now, I'm not one who counts the books that I read every single year. I had tried at one point to document my processes for reading, and it just didn't go well. Now, I still document them, but not in a way that keeps track of the number of books that I read. But instead, I document them online with my community that I've created. And it's more so feedback and the real time things that I'm feeling and thinking about as I read those books. Now, the books that don't make it online, I'm not really documenting them anymore. I may or may not get back into the system of sitting down for about 10 minutes every time I finish a book just to unpack my thoughts. But that's just not something that I've been doing. The only way I've really been documenting them is when I make short form videos or long form videos on them. I say all of this to say I do not think that people should read to be performative or to create characters or to one up on other people or to make themselves seem more intelligent. If you really want to, you can read more and not even tell anyone. That's not what this is about. The reason that I think that people need to read more, and the reason that I think that that is connected to sparking some revolutionary change for us as a society, is because reading is something that, one, it gives you a little bit more perspective and it helps you to be a very understanding person. Now, what I mean by that is you can read fiction, nonfiction, whatever, and you will come away from that experience. Eventually, it'll be very regular for you to not be so one sided in your thinking. So, this looks like, I don't know if you've ever read a book and you had such a connection to the antagonist, not in a way that you liked them, but you understood them, and they're the character that you're supposed to hate, you know? But you understand them because you go through the story depending on what the tone is and who the narrator is. You have this experience with this character that also reminds you of how people are in real life. As much as we all want to pretend to be the good person or the good guy, there's duality in everything that we do. And if we were all so perfect, why would we need salvation? Why would we have needed Jesus to die on the cross? Well, none of us are perfect. We all have things that we do and we need to work on. Now, I'm not saying that believers should be in open sin, but I'm saying that we all do things that we have to then repent for. So even though we may be mostly good people who are good people in society and functioning well and loving our neighbors, there are some areas where we fall short. And so I think that something can be said about when you experience the character that is so anti, that might be evil, that might be disruptive, they shake the table, they make you and the other characters in the storyline uncomfortable, but really it helps you to be more empathetic toward people. It helps you to be more understanding toward people. And that is something that is seriously lacking in our society. One example that I have regarding this is I posted a video, and I posted this video on TikTok and Instagram. It didn't really do crazy numbers on TikTok, but for some reason on Instagram, it took off pretty quickly. And most of the comments were men who were triggered. And I wasn't even talking to men, which is very strange. Now, something that I came to conclude in watching the comments of that was, one, I don't think that many of the men that were in the comments of that video read. I don't think that they read books. I don't think that they read anything. I don't even believe that they are at a point where they can watch a movie in its entirety without disruption. And I don't say that to be funny. I say it because most of the comments were, what I got from these comments, these people were not watching the whole video. They did not watch even 10 seconds of the video before they formulated an opinion. And then if they did watch the entire video, they concluded something that was completely different than what was communicated in the video, which is disturbing. And I think this goes back to this concept of we need to read more, because when we read more, we have to be challenged to focus on what is being said in the story. And sometimes you have to reread the thing. And when you read more, there's no conversation between you and the author. You just have to read those pages, or you got to put the book down. There is no, I'm going to go back and forth and debate. I think this is stupid. I hate the way you said this. You either appreciate the art or you don't. Now, I'm not saying that social media is a place where people should not be able to comment. I love commenting on videos and engaging with people. But what I'm saying is, I think that we would have a lot more intelligent people commenting, a lot more thought provoking things, a lot more comments that even if they disagree, they would offer additional perspective. Because I will also tell you, I am weary of the comments that come in that are, no, this is a terrible take. Oh, just no. Oh my gosh, really? We're still on this? I don't know what to do with those comments. I'm not offended by them. I understand you disagree, but if your goal is to have a conversation, it's not going to happen, because what am I going to do when I post a 4-minute video and you just say no? No, what exactly? And I don't think that people have the tools and the ideas and the bandwidth, honestly, to reply and to engage in appropriate conversation, because they're so chronically online, because they're not reading. They just engage in this way that doesn't require effort. It doesn't require thinking. And then when they are engaging with people, they are very mean and demeaning. It's very easy for people to be mean. And I just think that, one, is just a lack of connection, but also this thing that is missing from us when we read books, where we see different characters and you see yourself in characters. Something that reading books has really helped me with is being understanding and forgiving toward people, because oftentimes I can see myself in the terrible character. One of the more recent books that this was a real example that I thought about was, actually, this book didn't really have any all bad characters. When I got to the end, I was so mad at some people, but all of the characters had things I was like, oh, I've been there, I've done something like that before. But one of the characters in this book is called Little Fires Everywhere, and I do not have the book anymore. I gifted it to a friend of mine because I just knew that she would love it as much as I did. Have not watched the show, for those of you wondering, but eventually I will. I will watch the show so that I can see if it's just as good. But something that I found interesting was, as I was reading that book, every time I would find myself frustrated with a character, I could also find a point of, oh my gosh, I've done something like that before. Like, I remember one of the characters, and I don't want to spoil the story, so I have to be very careful of how I share this. But one of the characters did something to save her own butt, like to cover herself. And in doing so, she didn't throw another character under the bus, but she did something that was perceived as harmless. But then that harmless thing ended up being something that spiraled into this whole situation and pretty much ruined the other character's life. And it's funny because something like that has happened in my life before. And so when I read the book, I'm like, oh, I can see this in myself. And a lot of us are not given the opportunity to self reflect in that way because we're not connecting with literature, because we don't even read the Bible. Like, something that's really cool, it's not cool, but it's interesting, it's intriguing. When I read about the Israelites, and we can talk all day about how they were crazy and they were disobedient and what was wrong with them. Moses leaves for 2 seconds and y'all building up idols. But how quick are we to turn away from God? How quick are we to get shiny object syndrome? How quick are we to be disobedient when God is being so clear about the thing that he wants us to do? And again, it gives you this sense of understanding that people are just people. And I think there's something about reading that reminds us of that. It reminds us to be understanding. It reminds us to be empathetic. It reminds us to be forgiving. And the other aspect of this that kind of goes along with it is, reading invites nuance in a way that we often don't get from a movie, from media, from a 3-minute TikTok video, even from like an hour long YouTube video. reading introduces us to things, and we have to be patient enough to sit with it and to feel it. Sometimes you have to wait for the other shoe to drop in a story, and it might not drop until the very end. And here you are in chapter two. It also gives us a peek into the different lives of people who are somehow connected, but they're all different and they have their different quirks and they have their different things. Just to go with the first thing that I mentioned, in the way that it makes us more understanding and empathetic of people, reading also has that tendency to help us to appreciate nuance and seek it out in real life situations. And then to add on to that, the last thing I would say, which I just kind of mentioned it a bit, reading challenges us to be more patient. There's not much else you can do when you're reading. We're so plugged in our world that people text and drive, people scroll and drive, people are on their phones and driving, people are cleaning their houses, washing their dishes, doing laundry while watching a YouTube video. We're so used to doing one thing while also doing another, and reading is the one thing that fights against that. You can't read a book and do something else. Maybe you can eat. I can eat while reading a book. Like I can be taking bites out of my little sandwich or my soup or drinking my little smoothie while I'm reading a book. But it's pretty much limited to that. You can't watch a movie, you can't scroll, you can't be doing your house chores unless you're listening to an audiobook, right? But even if you're listening to an audiobook, you're still limited with your senses. If you actually want to comprehend and pick up what's happening in the book, you have to be fully engaged to what you're listening to, because the second you turn the audiobook into like background noise and you're doing other things, you're missing it. You're not going to grasp it. So in a sense, you still have to slow down even with an audiobook. And I will say, I'm not one of I don't really care if people do audiobooks. I don't care. I think that there's something so unique for me about holding a book. So I'm more of I like to have the book in my hand type person, but I don't think there's anything wrong with audiobooks. Get the information however you need. But obviously, if you're reading an audiobook, slow down and actually pay attention to the book so that you can take everything in. And so I think that's all that I wanted to say about the reading aspect. I just really want to emphasize that because we're not reading, we're moving at a much faster pace. A lot of us are very judgmental. And even in the space of, I mentioned that I don't really count and keep track. I know at the end of every year it's a trend, or people will go and say how many books they read. I can't do that because I don't know. I would have to go back and like touch all the books that I read or check my library catalog through my email. I'm not doing all of that. But even the people who share that, and the amount of flack and pushback that they get from the communities, they're like, you didn't read that many books. It's no way that was possible. Even that is annoying. It's annoying, and people who say it don't read books. I don't believe that they read books, because I also have to admit that it is the number of people who can binge watch TV shows. Mind you, I'm not shaming any of this, I'm just comparison. The number of people who can binge watch TV shows, watch TV every night, but then simultaneously say a person can't read X amount of books every year, it's crazy to me, because I tell people all the time, most of the time when I'm reading these books and I'm really consistent, you can finish a couple of books a week just with 20 to 30 minutes a day. Like, unless it's a really huge book. And even so, every book that you read is not going to be an encyclopedia. Some books are shorter. I had a book that I read, and I finished the book in like a day and a half, but it was really a book that if I sat down consistently, I would have finished it in a day. It's called A Cafe on the Edge of the World. And that book, and I remember when I read Who Moved My Cheese, those books are so short that you can just read them in a day. So imagine sometimes you have a bit of a shorter book, you have a bit of a larger book. I'm not here to justify it, I don't care. But I think that the pushback that those people get from, oh, you weren't able to do that, it comes from a community of people who don't read, so you don't understand the time investment to read is the same as what people spend on other things. So if you're a gamer, you probably spend the same amount of time playing games that a person who's really into reading spends reading books. And this goes to what I said about nuance and understanding and empathy and just patience, because I don't know how people have come to the conclusion that nobody has any time to do anything. You guys are ridiculous, because that's just not true. We all have time to do the things that we really want to do. It's just a matter of, do you prioritize your time in a way that allows you to do those things that you want to do? And I think that if we read more, We would be a little bit more understanding, and we would be able to grasp that concept that people are not lying about what they read. And you should read more because it will help you to be more patient and understanding of other people. Okay. Okay, that's enough about the reading. Let's talk about being creative. I probably don't have as much to elaborate on for this point, but it's just as important. I think that creativity without the pressure for it to be something good is beautiful, and it is necessary. And I think it would make us all less critical of each other. So, that and a few other things, but let's start with the criticism. When earlier last year, I got into drawing again. And when I say I got into drawing, I invested in, did I invest in it or did she give it to me for free? I think she gave it to me for free. I can't remember at this point. I think I got it for free. But I got this book from Lauren Horn, shameless plug because her product is great. It is called This Is Not a Sketchbook. The concept behind the book, you may or may not care. I don't know. Skip ahead about 30 seconds if you don't care. The concept of the book is that she teaches you how to draw things realistically, but there's QR codes. So it's like art class, but from the comfort of your home and at your own pace. So I picked that up. I was doing that, and immediately what started happening, initially my goal was, oh, I want to draw better and I want it to look realistic and I just wanted to be this. And it was very performative in a sense. But the more that I went through the process of doing those assignments, I was just happy to be creating something. I felt really good about myself to be creating something. And I think the ability to create something without it being perfect is what helped me with that. Same with, and this was closer towards the end of the year, this guy Alex sent me his product. It's called Palette. And it was just watercolor. It was palette, and it had an app, and the app helps you to stay consistent in creating something every day. You can like take pictures of the things that you create. There's this really cool thing called Doodle Buddy where you can shuffle different ideas. It won't show you a picture of the thing, but let's say I press Doodle Buddy and then it says skate, basketball, fish. If I didn't know what I wanted to create, I would just play with Doodle Buddy until it gave me something that's like, huh, yeah, I want to do that, which is really cool. And so, again, doing that, I did it maybe like 10 days consistently. And I was like, wow, like some of the things that I created, mind you, I'm not a watercolor specialist. I just started watercolor in December. It's January. But some of them, I was like, this is really cool. And I had borrowed concepts from what I learned. And This Is Not a Sketchbook. Just draw what you see, not what you think you know. And it was a relaxing therapeutic experience. And it was just something that slowed me down. It took away my desire to be perfect. And it was actually something that was a form, as I mentioned, of therapy in a way that I am not super critical of people anyway. But I think that doing creative things and seeing the imperfections, but also knowing like this is still beautiful. This is still something that's so cool. This is something that's worthy of sharing with somebody else. This is something that I'm proud of. And not because it looks great and it looks like this. Like, yeah, sometimes you're proud of it because it looks great. Like, that's a natural thing for us to want to be affirmed in what we do. But when you realize and when you start, well, I should say, when you start to create things, what happens is you realize you're not perfect, your creations are not perfect, and you also have this hypersensitivity where you don't want people picking on the thing that you created, and you don't want too much negative feedback. And one of the things I noticed was people love to give criticism and people love to tell you those things. But when it comes to your art, you can be very sensitive. And it's like, I'm just sharing this with you. I didn't really want your feedback to tell me it looks ugly or it could be better in this way. If I wanted that type of feedback, I would ask, you know? And I think that when you create something, you become so sensitive. And I also think that's why so many content creators, when you get to a certain point, you're not super critical of other people. You're not super. Now, there are some people, as I've mentioned before, that build their entire platforms on just critiquing people down, child. I don't know. But I think a good bit of content creators get to a point in their journey where they stop being so critical because they realize how hard it is to have people always criticizing you. And that does happen a lot as a content creator. People will pick you apart. They'll make stuff up. They'll say things that you never said. They will spiral and be emotional and accusatory and downright disrespectful in your comments. And in a way, if your content is art, which all content is a form of art, self expression, it just makes you very sensitive. It almost makes you not want to continue to share. And being creative and making things has made me realize that, be super aware of it. And as a result, I'm not heavily critical of people. Now, granted, the content that I make is very convicting. It is judgmental because that's it's meant to be. It's meant to be something that I observe. I've observed it in myself and I share it. But even when I say the things that I say, I don't say it in some nasty way that's meant to drag you down. I know some people hear it that way, but again, that's their triggers that they're feeling. That's not necessarily what I'm doing. And so creativity has a way of doing that for you too. It just slows you down to the process of being like, I don't need to be super judgmental. I don't need to be super condemning of people because I don't want people doing that to me. And then the other side of that, as I mentioned, is this therapeutic essence of it. So I got into creating those, I don't, we can call them book nooks. Some of them are not really book nooks because they're huge, but I got into creating book nooks and miniatures this year for the first time. And to say I was addicted, I am addicted is an understatement. But what I love most about it is just like reading, you can't rush through it. So I can listen to music, I can listen to a podcast, whatever, but not really because you're reading instructions and you're doing things with your hand. It just forces you to be in the moment. And I think so many of us don't give ourselves the opportunity to do that. For instance, people will wake up, they get ready for work, they drive to work. On the drive to work, they're probably listening to music or some talk show. And then they get to work and there's all this chatter amongst their coworkers. And when they're not chatting, they're actually doing their job. So they're consumed. They get off from work. If you have children, you go get your children. You go to bring them wherever they got to go. So there's conversation in the car. There might be music, another talk show in the car. So much external stimuli. And then when you finally do get home, it's probably like 5, 6, maybe 7 o'clock. So now you make dinner and then you drown out the day with like a movie and a glass of wine. And you don't ever have time to just decompress. You don't ever have time to just slow down and pause unless you intentionally make the time. And so one of the things that I read and this was our book club selection for last month, in The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, John Mark Comer is the author of that book. And he says one of the things that we have to remember is all the things that actually bring us rest, or most of the things that actually bring us rest, not the rest that you get from sleeping, but rest in your soul, rest in your spirit. Those things require emotional output. They actually require us to do a little bit of work. And one of the things that he referenced was reading your Bible, praying, and being intentional about your time with God. And so that's one of them, right? Reading your Bible is not the most thrilling thing to do after you've had a long day. Sometimes it can be exhausting and it can very quickly feel like a chore. Same with prayer. Even if you really want to do it, it's like, oh, if you're really tired, sometimes you can talk yourself out of it, or you can tell yourself how tired you are and it's just too much and you just don't feel like doing it today. You're going to do it tomorrow. And reading, being creative, sitting down to do the little puzzle, sitting down to put together the book nook, sitting down to paint, sitting down to color, those things do actually give you a sense of rest and ease. And it's because they force you to slow down. But doing them requires that you don't go plop down and mindlessly scroll on your phone, plop down and just turn on a movie, because those things can give you the immediate satisfaction of, oh, I get to lay my body down and I'm just going to be entertained and I'm putting myself on autopilot while something on a screen is in front of me. Again, no judgment, but that is just how I feel about it. And so when we give ourselves the opportunity to create, when we give ourselves the opportunity to really sit with a task and embrace it, it's almost like a form of resistance, but you also get the rest. And this is also something else that I'm going to tell you about from that book. I think you should really read that book. Something else that I want to tell you about is he even talked about Sabbath as a form of resistance. And it really blew my mind when he said that, because we all think about Sabbath as rest, honoring God. It's a holy day. But he said that Sabbath should feel disruptive. And if we all did it, imagine what the economy would look like. Also, imagine how much power the people would actually hold. Because if we collectively honored the Sabbath on every seventh day and we did not buy and sell, we stopped everything that we were doing to pause and be intentional, we would, one, get the rest that we need. Sabbath is a blessing. A lot of people look at it as a chore. And yes, sometimes there's prep that goes into it, because, you have to prepare for Sabbath with, if you do a feast, the first, the evening of the first night. If you really aren't cooking and doing all of these things, you're preparing, because you have to make food ahead and you have to prepare your life to go on pause for this period of time. And so I'm not making light of the fact that you do have to prepare for it, but in the preparation, it feels so good. Like the screens are off. You're not on the phone with people all day. You're not listening to all of this news and outlet. You're not posting anything. You're not talking to people through the digital lines. You're not physically working. You are in the house. You praising, you worshiping, you're reading your Bible, and you're spending time with your family. You're resting. And I can't explain how restorative that is. You would only know if you actually went through the process and did it. A lot of people feel like it's burdensome, but it's not. Now, that's not what this chit chat, this podcast episode was about, but I just wanted to add that since we were talking about the book anyway. But I do think that creativity is another one of those things that's like a form of resistance, and is something that will actively help us to see a revolution in the way that we think, in the way that we engage with each other, in the way that we behave. And I know somebody out there is going to call me an elitist for me saying that the revolutionary things of reading and creating are going to be what changes us. And I'm okay with that. I don't think that these are elitist takes. I think that if we think back to the times, depending on how old you are, when I was young, I read a lot and I was very creative. And I think we forget, even impoverished and poorer children, they too had to be creative when they were young. And we treat these things as though they are such a privilege now, but it's only because of the way that we see the world and the lens that we look through everything. So we tell ourselves that there's no time because we have to work, and there's no time because I need to relax, and there's no time. But I think the more that we convince ourselves that there's no time to do these things, the worse off we will be, because the only other alternative is doom scrolling. The only other alternative is media, watching TV shows. The other alternative is going out and spending your money, going to bars, doing a nightlife thing, maybe overly investing in time spent on those activities, or getting out of the house. And then we'll be complaining about how much money we don't have, when really you could get your library card and go get you some books from the library. Them people let you take as many books as you want. You bring a basket, just bring them back. Don't steal the people's books. If you want to buy books, you can go to the bookstore. Same with creativity. I think just because I talk about my little miniature house addiction, you don't have to spend $20, $30, $40 on those things every time you want to do one. You get you a hobby that you can afford. And some of the stuff that the library has to offer is free. My library has a lot of stuff, and I be taking full advantage. My daughters learned how to sew and crochet going to the library. Hello. The library has story time for children. This is another shameless plug, because I love the library. If you don't have a whole bunch of toys in your house for your children, take them to the library. They'll be straight. Take them to the library, let them play, and you get some work done. You get some reading done. I don't know. I'm not trying to be in your business like that. But just wanted to explain that these are things that we can explore. You don't have to choose the most expensive hobby. You don't have to do what other people are doing. Just because somebody you see on the internet is like, oh, you need to go to this happening hot new spot to have fun. If you don't have $50 to go to that spot, don't do that. Go do something for free. Okay? Go print you some coloring pages. Sometimes they have those free at the library too. Get you some crayons. Get you a watercolor set. They have that at Dollar Tree. They got coloring sheets at Dollar Tree. You get a whole coloring book for $1.25. Well, maybe $1.50. They going up on their prices. Dollar Tree ain't the Dollar Tree no more, girl. But my point is, do things on a scale that makes sense for you, and stop convincing yourself that you don't have time to be creative in some regard, to read in some regard, even if it's just a little bit a day. And I'm not going to tell you what you should read. Read nonfiction, read fiction, read children's books. Girl, I don't care. Just read, you know? I really do think that those are the things that are going to help us to strike a change in the world and to see more positive ways of living. So hopefully that was appreciated. Did a little bit of rambling in this podcast episode, but I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I do want to remind you that depending on when you're watching this, if you're watching this in January, girl, well, listening to this in January, we are coming up on the last session of the Womanhood series. So if you want to take part in that, be sure that you register before the doors close. This session is taking place from January 19th to January 23rd. There will not be another session after this because we are transitioning in things. And another thing that I like to add is book club is open for enrollment. So if you want to read books with us and have discussions and Q&A, enroll for that too. Get in where you fit in, girl. But other than that, this was more of a fun, uplifting episode. I wanted to start this Gregorian New Year on a high note. But we'll be back on the topics that we typically discuss. Maybe not. We'll be taking it where the wind blows us. But I have an idea and a feeling that we will be back on the regularly scheduled program and the topics that we typically cover. So hopefully this was edifying for you. Hopefully it blessed you in some regard. And I look forward to seeing you here at the same time next week, because the podcasts are now on Mondays. Got to give you something to get out of bed in the morning, Looking forward to seeing you again here next week, friend. Toodles.